great pleasure to welcome Adrian Stanford, the Group CTO at ESET South Africa, to this edition of What's Next. A great pleasure to welcome you to 2024. Adrian, how are you doing?
Thanks, Aki. I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
No, it's a great pleasure. And now we're talking about something that's really very topical, just globally, wherever you go. It is probably the number one business threat. It's a threat to our lives. And, even just recently in Davos, it's been highlighted the seriousness of cybercrime, and cybersecurity is at the forefront of any organization protecting themselves against the bad guys. So, and I'm sure you have your finger on the pulse on what the cybersecurity trends are. So tell us about those latest trends in cybersecurity, the landscape that's out there. What's going on? And I imagine that AI is adding additional complexity to that particular landscape.
Yeah, sure, Aki. It's threat landscape is a great place to start. So, I think what is not well known about ESET, aside from being a specialist provider of endpoint and XDR solutions, is that globally we have over 100 million users. And if you consider our partnerships with Google Play Store and Intel with their threat detection technology, we actually, in effect, protect over 1 billion user devices. So we have a huge amount of telemetry upon which our research is based. And we also have 35 years in the industry. And we have research centers all around the world in San Diego and Singapore and Buenos Aires and so on. So ESET's a very active participant in the research community. And we publish almost all of our research for free as a contribution to security awareness on our security blog, which is welivesecurity.com. So the trends that I'm about to discuss are from our latest threat report, which was published in December. And we do about 2 of them a year. And so this data primarily covers the second half of 2023. And this threat report is also available for free online on our blog. So let's get into it. Some quick detection statistics. On our top 10 detections, we are seeing phishing remaining at the number one spot, which accounts for 25% of detections. And these, of course, are attacks trying to lure out passwords and other sensitive credentials from users. We're also seeing a surprisingly or suspiciously growing number of malicious JavaScript attacks, which are scripts being injected into websites with vulnerabilities. And that's jumped from number 5 right up to number 2, accounting for over 10% of our detection. And we'll talk more about this in a second. And finally, in the number 3 spot, we're seeing 32% growth in sextortion email attacks with just under 10% detection. So overall, we're seeing detection volumes in general remaining relatively stable. The research team thinks that this is probably part of a return to baseline after the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict in 2022, when we saw a huge rise in detection telemetry. So in the threat report, there's a lot of detail, and I'll just take a few interesting stories which I think might interest your audience. But I do encourage the audience to actually download the report. It's a really great read. So a moment ago, we discussed I mentioned malicious JavaScript, and these are being injected mostly into vulnerable WordPress websites. So detections of this are up 111% in the last 6 months. So that's more than double. And this is basically a malicious script that is smuggled into an unpatched vulnerability in a WordPress or similar CMS-based website. And the alarming thing about this is, as a user, all you have to do is just visit the website and then you can get infected. You don't need to click a link or download anything. You really just have to visit the website. So that's quite alarming. And of course, if you have a product similar to ESET, then you should have some protection against that. But otherwise, really, all you need to do is visit them, and you can unknowingly be infected. And these scripts can do various things. Some of them can skim credit card information. Mag eCart is an example that just won't go away. Or they could just be a starting point for the attacker to then install other scripts onto your devices. And, depending on what their goal is, those scripts or other exploits, will do different things. But I think we should remind ourselves that, just WordPress accounts for about 40% of all websites on the internet. So we should not dismiss the significance of this trend. And it's also a reminder of, generally speaking, unpatched vulnerabilities are one of the leading causes of security incidents. And that's exactly why,
Yeah, absolutely.
In our products, we have a vulnerability and patch management solution in our offerings for that exact reason. So Moving on to
Adrian, tell me something. This vulnerability. Sorry to interrupt you. That vulnerability in WordPress, does it affect mobile devices as well, or is it desktop mainly? Or can it affect any device?
it depends on the script. I would say that desktops are probably more affected, but it can affect mobile as well.
Okay. So interesting. Hey? And just like that, unknowingly, you're visiting a WordPress website, it's infected, and you don't know what's happening in the background. Your machine gets infected as well.
Exactly. I mean, if you can put your shoes in the position of high-powered executives just browsing websites that they don't even know are WordPress based or not, it's a real concern. It's a concern for everyone, consumer and business alike.
Wow, scary stuff. So what other examples do you have?
Right. So ChatGPT, of course, everyone's favorite chatbot, which has become, very hyped up and mainstream in the last year. So this popularity makes it an obvious target for easy phishing. And what we've seen is the word ChatGPT has been used in malicious domains. So what attackers are doing is they are creating URLs that include the word ChatGPT, and that can trick users into thinking that they are accessing the actual ChatGPT service, when in fact they're actually accessing some kind of malicious website. And in the last 6 months, we detected over 650,000 attempts to access these kinds of malicious domains. And the kinds of threats that these domains lead you to are twofold. The first is an issue with API keys. So OpenAI, which is the developer of ChatGPT, you can actually get an API key from them if you want to access ChatGPT via API, and then they will bill you for the usage of that. Now, what happens is if you access one of these malicious domains, it will redirect you perhaps to a web application which has a bring your own API key kind of principle. So it asks you, please insert your API key, and then it will ostensibly use that API key on your behalf for whatever value add that they offer. Now, of course, this is a terrible idea. You should never reveal your API keys, but people do it. And the issue with this is that, look, it could be legitimate, but the chances are that your API keys are being leaked, and then somebody else could end up using it, and you might have a big bill to pay at OpenAI. The second issue with these kinds of URLs is they often promote the use of browser extensions. So they'll promote a browser extension that maybe has a GPT plus Google combined functionality, and that's the value add. So if you install this browser extension and you type in a search query, the results can be manipulated, and they can insert a URL which might then further redirect you to, if you click on it, it will redirect you to some other nefarious part of the internet. So yeah, anything that's really popular, this really shows us how hype around some new technology can be taken advantage of, and there's a lot of concern around this, and people should really be aware of that.
Wow, no, it's really, really scary, Adrian, out there, and by the sounds of it, and I guess it's getting worse, right? It's not getting better when you compare us to 2023 and 2022. We're actually getting worse, and these actors and these cyber criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated as technology becomes more sophisticated. So do they, with their methods and the technologies that they use. What can we see? What can we expect to see in 2024 and beyond? Is 2024 going to be the turning point or not for cybersecurity, that it will get better compared to previous years?
Yeah, no, Aki, I think you're making a great point that in terms of the threat landscape, it's usually getting worse as our lives, continue to get more and more technological and digital. I think maybe before we move on to 2024 and the future, there's one more thing I wanted to mention just about what we saw recently. Last year, probably the biggest hack that ever happened in terms of damages was I won't mention the name, but it was enacted by a ransomware group called Clop, and the product that they went after was a popular managed file transfer app, and many large organizations and government institutions use this program. And what happened was it was an exploit of a zero-day vulnerability in about May last year. And this vulnerability allowed attackers to escalate their privileges and gain unauthorized access to stored and transferred data. Initially, the impact was bad, but it didn't seem that bad. I mean, a couple of big names were involved, some airlines, some broadcast companies. But 6 months later, we learned that actually that was just the tip of the iceberg. And actually, it was way, way bigger than that. Thousands of organizations, over 2,700 organizations affected, US government, schools, healthcare, lots of global multinational companies. I think 91 million individuals are affected from this. And the estimated cost of damages sits at about $14 billion. And that makes it, from a damages point of view, the biggest ever. I think the previous one was the NotPetya ransomware attack from a couple of years ago, which was estimated at 10 billion. And law enforcement estimate the earnings that the attackers gained from this at about $75 to $100 million. So really, really big stuff. And what was interesting about this, Aki, was not necessarily the scale of the attack, but actually the technical proficiency of it. Again, it comes back to exploiting vulnerabilities. These attackers were actually testing this vulnerability as far back as 2021. And so they were probably waiting for just the right time, the opportune moment to launch their attack. And, that amounts to a dwell time of maybe 2 years. And the other interesting thing about it was, unlike normal ransomware attacks, no encryption or actual ransomware was deployed. Our research team speculate that maybe it was just too much data. There was so much, it was just too tedious to encrypt. And so they just stole it and then extorted the owners and forced the owners to pay for it. Otherwise, they would publish it. And they did publish it for the parties that didn't pay. All their data, thousands of organizations and data of millions of individuals is all over the dark web. So yeah, it was a really, really big hack. Just a couple of other tidbits that are kind of interesting from the research from last year. We saw a almost 300% increase in macOS password stealers. Now, granted, this is off a low base in absolute terms, but I think it's always important to draw attention to the fact that macOS is not immune from threats, as is commonly believed. And the other topic is in terms of cryptocurrency. We're seeing the price of Bitcoin has been rising again in the last few months. And previously, we've seen malware-driven crypto mining, which would correlate to the price of Bitcoin. And we've actually seen a divergence in that trend. However, we are still seeing a lot of crypto wallet theft happening. So yeah, there's a lot more great information in the threat report. And yeah, those are just a couple of the interesting points. So to your earlier question.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say to you is, are we going to see more or less the same stuff happening in 24 and 25, I guess, going forward? Because if these guys are planning attacks, 2 years back and it's just sitting there, what do you? I mean, it's scary what's possible for 2024.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, we can never truly predict. No one knows for sure what's going to happen in the future. But I do have some opinions from our research team. So let's talk ransomware. So aside from the story, that with this big hack that we just discussed now, ransomware hasn't been the most topical of late, but it has been a consistent threat. And our research team believes that existing ransomware actors are going to be increasingly active and more aggressive in their demands. We don't necessarily expect new players to enter the scene, but rather we expect ransomware gangs to scale up their operations using affiliate programs and ransomware as a service to effectively employ their potential competitors. Technology has really just made it easier and easier and faster to deploy ransomware attacks. And we always have to keep in mind that cybercrime, it's a business. And these actors think and run operations like businesses. And this is just one example of that kind of dynamic. So that's ransomware. The next one is IoT. And this is something that often slips into the periphery of general awareness. IoT remains an increasing concern, and we've discussed this in the threat report as well. But basically, IoT devices often are easily taken advantage of through vulnerabilities, and they are recruited into botnets, which can then be used in DDoS attacks. And the problem with IoT devices is that often the users of IoT devices aren't even aware. So they're kind of indifferent as to whether their device has been attacked or not, because it'll probably just continue being functioning as before, and the user is not directly affected. Meanwhile, it's being used for, but a nefarious activity somewhere else. And DDoS is everybody's problem. And the other problem is that manufacturers of these devices are often quite slow or even uninterested in implementing proper security measures. So it's really important for security researchers to carefully monitor. We have to really keep looking at IoT activity to understand this emerging threat. And we really want to draw more awareness to this issue, both from a user and manufacturer perspective. And that's exactly what our research team is trying to do with this topic. On the
And I think we need to clarify IoT in just a second, because you often talk to people about IoT and they think, oh, it's a corporate thing. It's not going to affect me. But the reality is that most people are using some kind of IoT device in their day-to-day lives, right? Whether you've got a nanny cam at home, that's an IoT device, isn't it? Or whether you have a security system that's linked to an app, there's an IoT device there. So they're all over the place, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. And I think what most people realize is that I think you're right, Aki, in pointing out that IoT, often the perception is of something quite sophisticated, of maybe home automation, which is absolutely applicable. But it can be as simple as something like your Wi-Fi router. In fact, a lot of these exploits are in older Wi-Fi routers. So most people, whether they are into tech or not, have some kind of IoT device, even if it's just a router or a smart TV. So on the Android front, we're seeing continuous growth in adware and hidden apps. And we're seeing these malware authors use generative AI to improve the language and content of these apps to make them seem more credible. And a particular concern is the growth of almost 300% to 85% in spy loan apps. So these are apps that masquerade as legitimate personal loan services. And what they do is, whether or not they offer a loan, invariably they collect personal and financial information, and then they actually use that to extort the users. And that's actually how they gain an advantage. So I should point out that most of this kind of stuff comes from people who've rooted their devices and are using third-party app stores, not the official Google Play stuff. So if you stay on official channels, the risk is significantly lower. But a lot of people get fake or free versions of apps through other means, especially in the Android domain, and that's where a lot of this type of stuff comes from. And then finally, the topic of AI, which everyone's favorite topic. We expect an increasing use of generative AI to add efficiency and effectiveness of scams, phishing, social engineering, and as well as the generation of malicious scripts.
Yeah, it's frightening. And I mean, let's talk about AI for a second, because there's a very strong correlation. There's a relationship between AI and cybersecurity, and I guess that AI can help you guys, improve on that, on cybersecurity, which we will talk about. But why is AI an advantage to attackers? How are they using AI to become more focused on their attacks and more efficient in their attacks?
Yeah, Aki, so just to kind of go back to your preface, you're quite right in pointing out that there's this dual relationship with AI, in that both attackers and defenders need it and have access to it alike. So to your point, or your question, which is, well, how does it help attackers? So I think it's good to take a step back from the AI hype of last year. Generative AI entered the mainstream, and it has been characterized as either an apocalyptic scenario or this panacea and solution to all our problems. And that perception extends into cybersecurity as well. It's either entirely doom or gloom, or it's the latest thing that's going to save us. Now, neither of those extreme scenarios exists. And I should emphasize that what we're discussing right now is true as of this moment in January 2024, but it's a fast-moving space, and we can definitely expect it to change. But as of now, despite the wild speculations that have been circling, artificial general intelligence doesn't exist as far as we know. So there's no generally intelligent machine that can learn on its own and independently make decisions without human supervision. So there isn't that supreme tool that can be used by attackers or defenders alike. But what is available is this kind of assistive tool that, as you said, can make attacks easier and more efficient. So, we've mentioned ChatGPT being used as a phishing lure, and that's a very simple example. But let's get into it a little bit more. So the easiest way to use generative AI, at least from an attack point of view, is that you can use it for content creation for phishing, spam, fake news, disinformation. So if you consider in the past, maybe it was easy enough to spot a phishing email because of the use of bad grammar. That is no longer the case, because chatbots can now produce perfectly grammatically correct phishing emails, and they can do it fast. So they can generate lots of content and give attackers lots of options. And you might say, well, but don't, chatbots have guardrails against that? And that is true, but it's relatively easy to just re-engineer. You can quite cleverly re-engineer your prompts, and you can get around these protections. So the content creation from generative AI is definitely a concern. Chatbots can also be used to create malicious scripts or new malware. The current ability, and the opinion of our research team on this is that the current ability is relatively weak. But as we saw in the threat report, there's a huge increase in malicious scripts being injected onto vulnerable websites. And new variants of these scripts can easily be created using generative AI. You can give it one variant of a script and it can modify it, and you can iterate really, really quickly. So again, we need to keep in mind that yes, right now the ability to create sophisticated malware might be weak, but the current state of technology is only going to improve. It's right now it's the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. So we'll need to, keep an eye on that. The other thing is that AI can increase the speed of an attack because it can extract and process data at such a great efficiency. You can extract targeted data from a leaked or stolen data set, and you can optimize the process of trying to profile potential victims and find the best possible way or topic to build an attack either against a mass population or a specific individual. And you can also use it to find vulnerabilities. So this is actually an example of good and bad. We know that Google and Microsoft are using it internally for their own software to find vulnerabilities. And if they're using it, then the bad guys can also use it. And I think maybe just the final thing I'll say is we've got deepfake technology, which of course is this tech that can be used to create fake but very realistic photo, video, or voice imitations. And in fact, one of our researchers in the UK, Jake Moore, did a little experiment, just a small one, and he managed to extract money from a business owned by a friend of his. And he just used a WhatsApp voice note, which made him sound like his friend, and that tricked his employees into making a payment. And I should point out, this was, of course, all done above board with all the consents involved, prove the point that this is a real and current threat. But I think the core message here is that AI has not yet created an entirely independent, autonomous cyber threat, but it is being used as in an assistive function, and it's improved the efficiency of cyber attacks.
Okay, interesting. But I guess the deepfakes and that are also going to affect things. And as you mentioned, you can alter voices and videos and make people sound realistic and identical, in fact, going forward. But you mentioned AI when it comes to an advantage to attackers, but I guess that AI can be used as an advantage to yourselves, like your organizations, to defend and protect in the cybersecurity space as well. So, they can use it. Yes, it's great, but I guess you can use it to a great advantage, AI.
Exactly. So again, in the same way that AI is not the silver bullet for attackers, it's not a silver bullet for defenders. However, it's an assistive technology, and yes, we need to use it. So, this technology exists out there for all to use. So the attackers are going to use it, and we need to use it, and we are. So let's talk maybe generally about how AI can help cybersecurity from a defense point of view. So it can accelerate research. So, most of cybersecurity is based on research. So it can improve the efficiency of discovery and analysis of new threats. That's something that our research team do all the time. It can accelerate detection, pattern matching, analysis of suspicious or malicious code, behavioral analysis, things like that. We can use it for monitoring of network traffic and analyze that for malicious or anomalous activity. We can use it as a complementary technology to other detection technologies. In terms of generative AI, we can use it to help distill maybe complex threat intelligence. So large language models can help summarize information and make it more easily understood by regular users or decision makers. We can summarize incidents, summarize cases, do trend analysis. So there's a lot that we can do as well from a defense point of view, and that also helps us in the fight against security.
And talk to me about your organization, ESET, and how are you using AI in your offerings? Where do you apply it, and how do you guys use it when you offer it to your customers?
Yeah, Aki, so we use it carefully and we don't try to oversell its benefits. So let's consider the fact that incorporating it into an actual cybersecurity product has many considerations. So for example, you can't just deploy a large language model on an endpoint agent. It's too resource heavy. And you have to be really careful from an engineering point of view to use this technology in the correct way to find that right balance for it to actually be useful and usable in your product. Another factor to consider is that any type of AI, including modern generative AI, if left without expert supervision, is going to malfunction. We've seen it in chatbots and we've seen it in cybersecurity. False positives can be as bad as an actual security incident if it grinds a business to a halt. So at ESET, our secret sauce is the human expertise and huge data set that we've accumulated for the past 30 plus years. And that allows us to create very effective, well-trained AI models that assist in detection and minimize false positives. We also don't pretend to market AI as the one and only silver bullet that solves all problems, because it's really not. It's an assistive technology. We must use it and it needs to be used, but we must also combine it with other technology layers in order to be truly effective. Having said that, I would like to argue that we have been a pioneer in AI for the past 25 years. And I'll tell you a story maybe to illustrate this point. So I'm sure you remember a few years ago, a few new cybersecurity vendors emerged on the market and they coined this term next-gen AV. And this term is still around. And in the process, they labeled all existing vendors as legacy or traditional. And the premise was something like this. It was, the existing vendors use outdated signature-based detections, whilst next-gen AV uses cloud-based technology, behavioral analysis, and AI. And the claim focus was really on AI being this technology that is, the solution to all problems. And we found this quite amusing and frustrating in equal parts, because we first introduced AI in 1998, and in 2005, we moved away from signature-based detection in favor of, machine learning-enabled behavioral analysis. We've got this technology called DNA detections. And then in 2010, we expanded that to become cloud-based so that it uses all of the technology worldwide that we collect to improve its efficiency. So it was quite amusing to us that years and years later, these new emerging vendors claimed that their technology was new and novel, and it was quite frustrating that the market seemed to believe the claim. But I think the key takeaway from the story is that just how much hype can inform market perception, and particularly that of key decision makers, because these vendors have been successful. Now, the same argument can be made of generative AI, the hype of which might have you believe right now that at this very moment it's the solution to all our problems, and it isn't necessarily the case. So what we do claim is that we at ESET, we have a strong, long-lasting track record of research, data, and human expertise, as well as pioneering multiple detection technologies, especially in the field of AI. And I think the best example of this is that as far back as 2021, we were already incorporating transformer-based AI models into our detection technologies. So transformer-based AI models are the same basic AI architecture that powers all of the generative AI that's been emerging now in the last year or so. So I think this really demonstrates just how far ahead of the curve we are and how much we always look to future technologies to incorporate in our products. Recently we've added some new AI features to our XDR offerings, such as automatic incident creations, just an example. And we're actually looking at other assistive technologies using generative AI that I can't quite talk about just yet, but we hope to announce soon. So we've always considered ourselves a front runner in the use of AI, but it is our strong belief that AI is just one tool in a broader toolbox of technologies that must be used to deliver useful real-world protection.
It's part of that bouquet, Adrian, and you guys have been doing this for more than 3 decades. So if there's an organization that understands cybersecurity, it certainly is ESET. So when you put this all together and you try and tie all those loose threads, because as I said, it is a bouquet. It's got a bit of everything inside. There's a lot of research. It's not a product that you can say it does this or it does that. There's a whole lot of different facets to it. How does this all tie into ESET's cybersecurity offerings?
Yeah, so Aki, I think the story I'm trying to tell here is that ESET is unique in a couple of ways. So we've got this really long track record in the industry, over 3 decades, which has allowed this huge accumulation of data. And that doesn't mean that we're a stale legacy player. It actually means quite the opposite. It means that we've managed to, over the years, successfully reinvent ourselves and bring new detection technologies to market over and over again as the threat landscape has evolved. The second thing is we have this really large research competence that has cultivated a very high level of human expertise, and that is really fundamental to the creation of effective cybersecurity products. You can't just rely on automated technology to create protection. It needs the guidance and knowledge of expertise, and we have decades of that. And finally, as I've just mentioned, we've been a constant industry pioneer in the field of AI and other novel technologies in cybersecurity for decades. So it's this combination of these factors of advanced technology, human expertise, threat data that allows us to offer really, really advanced detection with very low false positives and at very high efficiency. Our products are very low impact, high efficiency. And we have this detection philosophy of multiple layers of detection. And look, we could talk for hours about each detection layer, and we won't do that. But some of it is cloud-based, where we can employ the most sophisticated and powerful AI models, and others are highly optimized, really efficient models that sit on the endpoint themselves. And all of this trickles down to our actual market offerings, our products and our services. So we're quite well known for our endpoint protection offerings, and they have an impressive array of detection technologies. We also have a really good XDR offering that leverages these same core detection technologies. What's lesser known is we have an enterprise threat intelligence service that is based on all of our global research and data. So we have a data feed and we have a premium APT report service. But perhaps I'll talk about our most recent offering, which is our MDR offering, our managed detection and response, where we're bringing the XDR product stack paired with professional support and security services such as threat monitoring and hunting to market. And I think what really sets the service offering apart, aside from the great products that it's being paired with, is that we offer it locally with local support, but it's delivered by our global team. And what this means is we get to leverage ESET's global track record and participation in security research. Our security team, the services team, has a really deep understanding of threats and how attackers think. And additionally to that, they have direct access to malware experts and product development teams who can add insight and context when we do, say, forensic investigations. They have access to the latest threat intelligence data from our global research team. So they really have a unique access to information and expertise that I think a lot of other security service offerings might not have. And our MDR service is based on, this really excellent XDR product tool called ESET Inspect. It's really sophisticated and highly capable, and the global team are the most competent users of this product. So they really know how to get the best out of it and deliver great results. And as an added benefit, they can also drive the feedback mechanism. So from real world use and insight, they can feed that back into the product development, and we can make the product even better. So there's this really lovely symbiotic relationship between the globally based service offering and the product offering that I think is really compelling. And yeah, we're really excited to bring that to market.
Well, I think that anybody watching this needs to have a chat to ESET and see what they can offer and what they can do for their business and on an individual base and a business base. But at the end of the day, you need to take cybersecurity very seriously in your organization. And if there's one organization with a track record and adapting to the changing times, it certainly is ESET. And Adrian Stanford is the group CTO at ESET Southern Africa. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Next, Adrian, and sharing those insights. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aki. It was a great pleasure to be here.